Welcome to The Roadmap. We are your hosts, Gogo.
I'm Coach.
And we're here to have real conversations with people whose successes you may know, but whose stories you probably don't.
We're connecting with the mentor, the founder, the artist, and the builder to uncover the personal journeys that they have taken.
No business roadmaps, no project roadmaps. This is the roadmap of your life, and we're here to explore it with you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the roadmap. I'm your host, Gogo, with my fellow host, Coach, and we're here with our good friend, Gav Blaxberg, CEO of Wolf Financial. A lot of people in our industry simply know him as Wolf because he is synonymous with his business. And we're so excited to have him here today. He is our third guest on our podcast, and 3 is the magic number. We're so excited that he has made time to join us and get personal with us about his journey from basically his high school days all the way up to now. Gav, is it correct that you're only 24 and you are a CEO of your own booming business in not only Web3, but trading financial in Web2?
Yeah, I can affirm this. I appreciate y'all having me on as well. It's great to be here.
How are you doing today, Gav?
Today, everything's going well. It's a Friday, which means that I'm getting ready for the next week of Spaces, starting my DMs going out, starting my scheduling, starting my graphic design for the schedule that gets pinned on my post each week, plus going through a series of meetings and everything. So enjoying it. I'm sitting here looking out over Houston at the moment. I'm in about a couple hundred feet up in the air, I would say. So having a pretty nice view out here. So yeah, enjoying it and just ready to get into things here.
Wow. And you travel a lot.
I do try. I think that there's a lot of value to being able to travel a lot, right? Because I remember back when I was working at jobs where I didn't have that opportunity, and you only get to travel once or twice a year or something like that when you get vacation days. So I figured if I have the opportunity to work from wherever, and I've been doing it pretty well here, and I'll be traveling next week again, and probably after that again as well, might as well take advantage and use that to, get around and see different people. This is more of a leisure trip, but most of the travel has actually been for work travel, which I think is just super valuable to be able to meet people in person. I found that a lot of my great connections came from in-person meetings, in-person conferences, in-person events. I think I tried to meet around 500 people in person last year throughout the year, and that went really well. And a lot of good business and connections came from it.
That's fascinating. And again, like the ability to travel and do all that stuff, right? We're afforded the opportunity based on kind of where we're at, right? Web3, it's kind of boundless. It knows no boundaries from a location perspective. But you said Houston was like, it's a leisure trip right now and you're still operating and doing all that stuff. Where's actual home base? Like, where'd you grow up? Because again, myself, Gogo, like the listeners, one thing that we do on the Roadmap is we want to understand like the overall journey. So like, I'd like to reel it back and understand where home is and kind of where things started for you.
Sure. Home is Baltimore, Maryland, and I still spend a good amount of time there when I'm not traveling. It's kind of a home base. Still got plenty of family and friends there. So that was where it started out. And then I went to college in Philly. So those have been kind of my 2 main bases.
And college was Drexel, right?
Yes, college was Drexel. I studied finance at Drexel in Philadelphia. I was very, very, very involved on campus in a number of ways. And that ended up obviously benefiting me because that helped me find what I wanted to do full time before graduation and start really working on it so that by the time I graduated, I didn't really have to think about applying to other jobs. I just kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do.
So you Baltimore, Drexel, and again, I want to get to like all the Drexel like accolades because again, as in doing my research and trying to understand as much about you, like there's a lot. You've got a lot kind of that you've done, but where did things start for you in Baltimore? Because I mean, again, obviously right now you are CEO of your own company, age of 24, but like I'm curious, like how did it start and where did you start and where did kind of the entrepreneurial side, where did all of Gav's magic sauce, where did it start?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a very orthodox religious part of Baltimore, specifically called Pikesville. And so everyone that I knew around me for a long time growing up was an Orthodox Jew, and that's a little bit of a secluded lifestyle. So even within that secluded lifestyle, I like to think I was entrepreneurial. My first company that I technically started was called Home. It stood for the helper of mostly everything. And I was basically just going around my neighborhood, just knocking doors, seeing what people needed help with, if they needed their car washed, their lawn mowed, whatever it was. But progressing from there, I went through a series of different schools as I was trying to, I think, find my place and to where I fit from both a religious perspective, a personal perspective. And I ended up in some pretty great high schools, specifically one called Beth Tefillah. And while I was at Beth Tefillah, I ended up meeting another person there who went to school with me, and we ended up starting an additional company, which was a hospitality services company. And that was in my senior year. And so we started, it was basically a kosher waitering and catering company for the community. We just saw an opportunity for arbitrage, in my opinion. I think that everybody in my community was having tons of lunches and catered dinners and meals. And I just started gathering some of the pricing around these things. And I thought it was absolutely outrageous what they were charging for things to be just really put out on the table and someone coming back into the kitchen and clean up and set up and stuff. So I basically just cut their prices in half and started going around and giving people that offer of, hey, I'll just do it for half the price. I'll bring in my own team and hire some of my friends and create it. So that was, I guess, where the entrepreneurial spirit started really going. And then, went to Drexel and tried my best to kind of keep things going at Drexel with not always, running my own company or anything like that, but at least just being super involved in positions of leadership.
That's really interesting, and I feel that much closer of a relationship to you, strangely, because my best friend of many years went to Drexel University. So that's so interesting. In high school, it's such an interesting time to have like formative passions develop there. A lot of people pursue different things than what they were interested in high school. But I think, similar to you, my passions formed very cohesively in high school. A lot of it is in the creative arts. And a lot of it was very entrepreneurial as well. I went to a lot of like business development camps and things like that. So yours was formed organically through kind of the neighborhoods and cultures and religious relationships that you had, and you were able to just kind of capitalize through your own intelligence, like, hey, this is a great model for actually expanding on my talents, and through things that I've been brought up in just naturally among my peers, among my the elders in my community. Here's what we can do with that, and kind of like break down the monopoly you saw in your neighborhood. What did you do with that, transitioning from high school into university? How did you expand upon that?
Well, I kind of had to make a decision when I was going into college with my company, whether it's something that I really wanted to continue, because mostly I was working it on weekends. What I ended up doing with the company was I basically just brought on a full-time manager, and then they ended up basically making most of the profits, and then I took out my own thing. But it's hard to say that I knew exactly what I wanted to do going into college, because I can't necessarily say that. I think my goal was to do something in business for a couple of reasons. The first was I'd had this company, I'd seen success with it. I really liked being in that business world. I vividly remember the first conversations I was having of negotiations on the phone, talking price, talking terms, negotiating with my own employees and stuff like that. And those were all very formative experiences. But at the same time, I also had a feeling that I wanted to do something with the stock market in the business world. And that was coming from some high school classes where really my passion for that got started in 11th grade class, where my teacher started this grade wide competition of everybody having a market watch account and essentially a fake money paper trading competition against each other. And it was $100,000 that you were given. And the idea was just, hey, whoever has the most at the end of the year, you win the class wide competition. Maybe there'll be a prize or something. And I don't think many people took it very seriously. Of course, maybe they just bought a stock or two or didn't care about it at all. But for some reason, I was just so drawn into it, where I was now spending hours a day poring over research and trying to figure out how I could potentially win this competition. I was sitting in the back of class, not paying attention to physics, but just trying to trade. And I was, instead of going to recess or breaks, I was just going to my economics professor's office and talking to him. And trying to figure out where there was good ideas. Should we be looking at gold? Should we be looking at oil? Just different commodities and stuff like that. And I ended up winning that competition. And I think that that was a big boost for me to really want to go in and study something. So going into college, I knew I wanted something in the finance realm. I also knew I liked business management. So I kind of was like curious, like how could this all marry together? And it took time, right? Of course, and it eventually did. But that's my mindset going in.
So I have a question regarding like you brought up like 11th grade and I'm going back to when I was in 11th grade, right? Or even before. And I'm thinking about, sports, and I'm thinking about how to pay for a car and about trying to get into college and all of those different things. And again, it sounds like from an early age, right? You like the wires, like what you focused on was a little bit different than, I don't want to say the typical, but it was typical from how I grew up or my experiences. Was there anything within your family, or was there anything that kind of led you down that path?
The path of being wired
More
for
like
business.
from the entrepreneurial side of things, and like again, not, and I hate to say like not focused on typical high school things, because again, everybody focuses on different things, but like I'm much older than you, right? I'm 43 years old. And for the most part, when I was, it was chasing girls. It was trying to figure out how to get into college. It was all the things that, your stereotypical high school age male would do. And I was wondering if there were any influences from like a person or from a family perspective that kind of shifted that or kind of helped lead you in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of taking it back a little bit to my childhood, my dad was an entrepreneur too. My dad was a chiropractor for a few decades and had his own practice and, ran that. And that was very successful until early on in my childhood, which is kind of like a formational period, which was the 2008 crisis, which, I think affected a lot of people, but I can only speak from my personal view of how it affected us, which was in 2007, my dad took a lot of his money that he'd made from being a chiropractor and invested it into real estate. Now, it's hard, when you look back, to blame someone for going out there and trying to take advantage of a booming market. But of course, in hindsight, we can say that it was, poor risk management potentially, and he levered up for it as well, took out a HELOC and other pieces. So it kind of was a very formational period for me because we went through 2008 and went from a lifestyle of, hey, my dad's a doctor and makes a bunch of money every year and we can eat out whenever we want. And everything then suddenly changed. And it was like, oh, we can't, eat out whenever we want. And we can't afford necessarily to do this or do that, and kind of some different pieces along those lines. So without getting, too far into it, like I definitely have some pretty vivid memories of that moment. And I think the biggest thing for me that I realized coming out of that was that it just didn't matter how much money you made, but how much you ended up keeping was a huge factor as well. And that's a lesson that I've had to learn multiple times myself, even over the past couple of years, as I tried to, take my own money and find ways to double that up, and have been bitten here and there. But I would say that going through 2008, going through, my family ultimately having to declare bankruptcy at the time in order to get out from the crushing debt of, several houses and foreclosures and mortgages. And we weren't alone with that. But, as a kid, like I was 10 years old, I still vividly remember it. And I think it definitely pushed me to get into the mindset of like, life should never be too easy. You should always be kind of like pushing yourself onto the edge. And also you really have to be very calculated with the risk that you take and ensure that, the work that you're putting in isn't just going to all kind of disappear. So I think that was a pretty big moment for me coming up as a kid. And it definitely pushed me to say like, all right, like I need to be in a position where I control my own destiny above all else, because a lot of people like didn't even control their own destiny in these situations, right? They got fired, they got laid off during these crises. And we really never saw one until, just the last few years. Like we had 2008 and then everything was good for a decade or so. And thankfully, and it was prosperous and all that. And hopefully we'll get back into it again soon. But yeah, that was a big moment for me.
That's such an important aspect of your story to share. I think so many people can relate to that. Parents who work so hard for their family, and they're ultimately beholden to what the market does, and how those things perform, and especially even if they own their own businesses, but especially more so if they're part of a larger conglomerate
Yeah.
and they get laid off. That happened to me in my teen years with my father, and watching how he did or did not respond to that in a successful way definitely challenged me when I was in a university later after that, thinking, okay, I can't go into a career where I feel like I will be beholden to people higher up than me, or be like affected by a market. Like I want to do something for myself. I want to be more on the entrepreneurial side. I want to have a business for myself. And I see that in so many of us right now, like you, Gav, so many of us in this Web3 industry that want to create careers and markets for ourselves. And we're all kind of working together. I think a lot of people probably listening into this podcast at this point are probably looking for other people to relate to in that same vein. So I'm so glad that you shared that part of your formative experience. More people probably have those similar experiences than anyone really talks about. So you took those lessons, it ignited a fire in you to just say, I want to take charge of my own experiences. I want to be in charge of my life, my finances. It pointed you in directions where you could say, these things are exciting to me. Finding trends and patterns in markets and economic spheres where I can say, through my own understanding of the market, I can predict what's happening. I can work with others. We can identify patterns, indicators, things like this, and I can capitalize off of this. I can start my own business. I can involve others who have similar passions, and we can grow bigger together. um, what what involved the process from you to eventually study these things in university and then get involved later on with the positions you took, like Goldman Sachs, things like this, where you eventually, I know you didn't stay with them permanently, because here you are in charge of your own affairs. What involved the decision making process from there?
Just to clarify within the question, is it why I ended up transitioning from those positions, or
How did you end up with people like Goldman Sachs and the other private equity firms that you ended up going with, first and foremost?
well, yeah, I think, so I had a lot of assistance from Drexel with getting these positions. So huge shout out to Drexel because they really help you get into these positions, working full time at companies where you can really figure out what it is that you want to do, right? And the first position that I was able to get into wasn't something for me. And I think that's what a lot of people go through, right? Where they get into a job and they kind of learn whether it's for them or not for them. And my first one was accounting. And I learned that that wasn't for me. And so I ended up leaving that position ultimately, and that Goldman position was what came next. And it just felt like a better fit for me at the time. And the reason that I pursued that was because it was very people facing. And in my mind, I wanted to do a job where I could be people facing. I didn't like the idea of just sitting at a computer on Excel with numbers for hours and hours and hours. And that's kind of what I've been doing in accounting, right? It was just zeroing out spreadsheets, just making sure numbers lined up, that every cent was accounted for. And that really wasn't the position that I applied for at Goldman. The one that I applied for and ended up getting was private wealth management, where I was speaking with high net worth clients on the phone daily. And it was more of a relationship based position where I was talking with them about what was going on in the market. I was talking with them about how their portfolio was doing. I was talking to them about their kids. I was talking to them about all these different types of pieces where it was just forming a relationship, and also, of course, prospecting, right? Like figuring out like how to go out and actually find these people, which kind of sucks in the moment, but I think is a very valuable skill to have over time periods, and something that they were able to kind of teach me from there. And then with the private equity firm, I think public markets I thought were super interesting, but the way that you look at it, the typical path is a lot of people come out of finance, majors, and they enter into the workforce and they start out with a banking gig, perhaps, or something like that, and they maybe do investment banking for a couple of years, and then they go into private equity. Everyone's like trying to like get to those private markets. So what happened was I got an offer from this private equity firm to come work with them as an analyst. And so I just took it. I felt like, I've seen some of the public markets, and I feel like a lot of people work years and years and years to try to get an offer for private equity. And I don't want to turn this down. So I was kind of considering just continuing in a relationship-based role, but I figured I want to go ahead and try that out. And I'm glad I did. The private equity firm was obviously very different from a Goldman atmosphere. The way that I would describe, like the Goldman atmosphere was just the most hectic atmosphere that I've worked in personally, where you have an open floor, you have, just basically like desk, like pods of desks, and there's phones ringing all the time. There's always people talking. There's always computers going. And when I went into private equity, it was just like the opposite of that. It was like office, all quiet, nobody really like kind of back and forth talking. But at the same time, the work was super interesting because I got to go down and actually like dig into these companies that we were purchasing, flipping essentially by revitalizing them, revitalizing their boards, making sure they had all the resources necessary in order to survive. And also, I mean, like we were doing it at a pretty good time because this was in 2019 going into 2020. So there was some good opportunities still at the moment. Things were kind of growing. And then really the transition from there was the pandemic hit. The firm, which had been in a pretty good position, was now in a rougher position because they were trying to go in. Like it was a distressed asset private equity firm. So they were buying these companies that were laden with debt and had problems and holes in them, and then fixing them and reselling them. So that's a tough position to be in when a pandemic hits because the companies that are already at the bottom of the barrel aren't exactly getting helped. And so I ended up kind of like helping the firm for a month or two, and then realizing that this could end up being a multi-year process, and it's not something that I wanted to deal with for years, being in this industry where we were just trying to salvage these companies throughout a pandemic. And I got a phone call from a friend from college talking to me about this idea to come and build something in the finance space, and social finance is becoming such a big, concept, and we got to take advantage of it. And I ended up transitioning into the Wolf team, and that has obviously come a long way over the past few years. And it's not the company it was when I first found it. It was a very different company when I found it. It was a social finance company that was going to build its own app, and that has transitioned over time to what it is now with Twitter Spaces. But that's the long story of kind of going through the public markets to the private markets and then leaving those for ultimately where I am now.
So one small question before we get to Wolf, and so I'll do this and then I'll transition us into kind of Wolf because I want to understand how that happened and what the genesis was. But I mean, when you're talking about Goldman, like I picture the typical movie scene, right? Like in Boiler Room, and like I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Probably on like an equity, like a trading desk, or probably maybe at like GSAM, which is like their asset management, but not really a private wealth. Definitely active, like definitely there's stuff going on and there's people taking calls, but we're not like, I wasn't on like a trading floor itself. I was on more of like a relationship management type floor. So if you're like a relationship manager, like the last thing you want them to hear is just like craziness in the background,
Sure.
right? Like you want them to call you and just hear like order and like stuff like that. So I think that's a little bit more along the lines. Nice spot, nice office, nice place, smart people. I networked a ton while I was there. I made sure that I got FaceTime with like every single person, even if it was just 5-10 minutes. I had a notebook actually. This was one of the first things that I did when I got there was I actually got a seating chart. So I got a seating chart of the whole office. There were 76 people that worked on the floor that I was on. And on the seating chart, it said every person's office or desk where they sat and their name on it. And then I basically just started methodically going through, and I would either email or walk over to the person, say, hey, I'm new to the firm. I would love to grab coffee with you. Are you available X and X times? Then I'd get it. Then I'd take a little pen and I'd X off on like the seating chart until I made sure I had every single person. And then I also would take notes, and I had a full notebook by the end of it that was filled out. And every single person, I had like 10 questions that I would ask them on their background, books that they recommended, success tips for surviving at Goldman, just all these different pieces. And I ended up filling out maybe 2 notebooks, I would say, full of just notes on information on these people, like where they went to school, who else they recommended I talk to at the office, all different types of stuff. So I really I would say the environment was like a little bit more professional than probably it would be on like a trading floor, but I definitely made sure to like really network my way around and talk to everybody and be a part of the atmosphere.
I love that because like for me, I've talked to several people, and I consider myself almost like a serial dot connector, right? And it's again networking. Even with, like when I was coaching collegiately, when I first got there, okay, where are all the coaches' offices? I want to go ahead and sit. I want to go walk. I want to talk, introduce myself. I want to understand how we recruit here. Like, what are the things we sell? What is this? And then also get to know somebody on a more personal level, right? Because again, we're in the business of dealing with people. Relationships are key, and obviously, as you mentioned, right, like you got a call to transition out of private equity into Wolf, and again, it sounds like it's relationship focused, and it's somebody you built that connection with. Can you talk to us about that transition?
Yeah. So the way that this worked is it's like middle of March 2020 and the pandemic just hit and everybody is out of the office now. I left the office in Philly to head back to Baltimore because I thought that they were going to shut down the state and I thought that they weren't going to let people out of state borders. So I figured it's a good time. Maybe let's get back home just in case things do fully shut down. So I come back, and I think this is maybe the first or second week that I'm back because I think it was end of March. I get a call from a guy that had actually been in my fraternity at Drexel, and he tells me that him and a few other people are building something, and they're basically trying to just take advantage of like, hey, we have all this free time, right? Like we were all just so used to hanging out or partying and other stuff, and now we have all this free time, and we want to build something, and we already have somewhat of a team going. So the way that they tell me is their idea is they want to just create something that makes financial analysis easier. Like that is the goal of the company. And they say, think about it, like you just took a finance like major. Did they ever really teach you how to like conduct stock research? And I'm like, you know what? Like you're right. Like they give you these they give you an understanding of like looking at cash flow and balance sheets and other stuff like accounting, but they don't really teach you how to translate that over super well to an actual stock and a stock price. And certainly they don't cover like trading or anything. Like they're only going to cover long term and stuff like that. So it was like, all right, well, how do we make something for this? And so they had already grabbed together a couple of engineers, like devs. They had a couple of people on like graphic design and stuff like that. But the problem was that there was nobody kind of calling the shots from the top with any sort of order that was keeping teams accountable and stuff like that. So it was an interesting call for me because when they reached out to me, my expectation was that they were asking me to come on as CFO. That's just kind of the role that I played in a lot of things because I was always the finance guy. But instead, they asked me to come on as COO and to run operations and to basically be the connecting piece between the dev team as well as the finance team and make sure that they were attending meetings, set up meeting times, run meetings, all that type of stuff. I thought it was a cool opportunity. And I basically was like, all right, let me try this out, right? Like, I don't know if I really have too much else going on at the moment. I'd be curious to try this out. I come on board. So this original company is like the original Wolf Financial. It's some guys from Drexel, and I come on as the fourth board member in addition to three co-founders who are CEO, CFO, CTO. It becomes very clear in the beginning that this company really needs direction and really needs somebody that's just going to kind of be at the helm. Mm-hmm. And I basically throw myself into that position. The CEO, who was a really, really smart guy, was pretty young at the time. I think he was 18 at the start. And I think this was when I was like 21. And so I kind of took the leadership role over there. And then I just really transitioned that into me being just everything. I would say like running hiring, running a bunch of different pieces. And slowly but surely over the course of the rest of 2020, we work on building out an MVP product, which we can build and bring to the App Store, start getting users. By the end of 2020, we have our MVP product. It's an app, and it's kind of similar to along the lines of people that have seen like a Public or like a StockTwits or something like that. It's like that, but in our eyes, better because we've added all the features that we want to have in there right into it, and kind of the little changes that were like, what would we have changed as a person, of our age group and whatever. And at this point, the idea now becomes, okay, we have an MVP. Now, how do we get users on it, right? Like, because if we don't have users, because ultimately in our minds, we're just thinking, how do we raise capital here so that we can blow this up? And we're like, all right, the first step is to get users because you need to show people, hey, people are actually using this. We have, 5,000 monthly active users that are coming on for 2 hours a day, right? Whatever it is, like we just have to show it to them. And we don't really have budget, right? So we don't have budget to go out and like spend and like get influencers to, promote our thing. So instead it's all right, become your own influencer day. And so we, go out and it's like, all right, let's make our socials And so we start building on social media, and this is kind of going for like a month or two. And then our head of social or head of marketing ends up exiting the company. It just wasn't a good fit at the time. And it's like, okay, well, like now what do we do? And so the board approaches me. They're like, you like using social media. Why don't you take over marketing? And so I'm like, yeah, I'm not, running everything else right now. Why not? And so I'm like, all right, let me take a stab at this. Like, what is my favorite media? It's Twitter. And so I remember the day I create Wolf Financial Twitter account, and I just start doing some general tweeting. I think like our first real day of tweeting was like we live tweeted the GME trial when they did that. I think this is like maybe like Feb 2021 area. I think it happened. And so we like live tweeted the GME trial, and those were like our first like tweets coming out. And anyways, it basically is like 3-4 months of just throwing tweets into the abyss, pretty much. We're gaining a couple hundred followers. I'm getting noticed by different accounts. I'm starting to slide into some DMs. I get a few people signed on that are small accounts that are going to back the app. We give them some special offers. We don't have budget yet, so we can't really pay anyone. And then in March of 2021, everything changes because I hear my first Twitter space. And I go, oh, this is big. And it's like maybe just my first or second Twitter space. Immediately, I'm like, this is it. I found it. I'm early to this. Nobody else is doing this. This is perfect. I hadn't been on Clubhouse yet because I had an Android at the time, so I couldn't even use Clubhouse. So I'm like, this is just open to all the markets. I immediately go and I start cold DMing people that work at Twitter. I found their ats because the Twitter Spaces account only followed people that worked at Twitter. And so I just started DMing them. And within a week, I have access to Twitter Spaces. And I started hosting my first space. The response is just so positive off the bat. There's like 350 people in there on our first space. And of course it crashes. All of the first space crashed like all the time. Like you couldn't go more than like 30 minutes. And the account just starts pumping like 1,000 followers a week. And I'm not even hosting that many spaces. I'm hosting like a few spaces a week because I didn't want to overdo it. If I could go back to the early days, I would be hosting 40 hours a week off the bat, right? Like I just didn't know that people wanted this much content all the time. And that was one thing that I had to learn. But long story short, the account really starts getting some legs under it, really starts rolling throughout 2021. We get to the end of 2021, and now it's basically like, my bad, I should take this. We get to the middle of 2021, the account's growing and some things are happening, and now we actually have a leg up on raising capital. The thing is, as we go to raise capital, we realize that this is going to be a difficult process because there's several other apps that are building something similar to ours. So how do we get our advantage? We built out a product, which we called Wolf Shield at the time. And I can't go too far into it right on here because I think it would take too long anyways, but it was a really unique insurance product for investors. And this caught the eyes of our potential investors. And now they're looking at this, and eventually the discussion becomes, we love this product so much that you're building, but it doesn't make sense for you to put it into a social finance app. You're going to have to raise $50 million to build out a GDP, a GAP compliant or whatever it is. I don't know. It's like there's compliance with European and all these different areas. They're like, it's just going to cost you so much money. Why don't you scrap all that and just build out this technological insurance product for investors as an API and just sell it to brokerages? Like, why are you putting so much stress on yourself? And ultimately, the original co-founders decide, hey, that's not a bad idea. And it seems like the only way that we're going to get funding here. So they make this giant pivot in December of 2021 and say, we are going to scrap this app that we've been working on for a year and a half. We're going to fire everybody, and we're just going to completely pivot into building out this insurance product. And at that point, that's when the crossroads came to me, because the way that it was presented to me was, you've built this audience, which at this point has 30, 40,000 followers, and you're clearly a key integral part of it. This feels like the thing that you should continue doing. And what they wanted to do is, of course, the company owned the social media account. They wanted to sell it, right? So they figured, hey, they could get good money for it. They could sell it off. There were already people that were interested. And they figured, hey, you know what? Like, this is probably a good fit for you. You can just go work for someone else. They'll pay you. You'll actually get a salary now to run this. And like, you can just continue doing what you've been doing. For me, though, this didn't sit right because
Mm.
I didn't like that idea of going and working for someone else and now they're taking over the account and stuff. And so after a few conversations with mentors, I reapproached the other board members and I basically proposed to them that why sell this? All you can get for it is money. Sell it to me and I can give you equity because I owned equity within the company. And so I ended up using a portion of my equity, bought the whole brand off of them, took over Wolf as the sole owner, and just kind of decided in that December, like, hey, spaces are really popular. I've never made any money off of them. I've never made any money off the Twitter, of course, because I haven't owned it. But I believe that if I can take this over, like this could be something big. And so took that leap, purchased the account, purchased the brand, took it over as mine, separated from the rest of the team, which spun out and renamed and pursued the insurance product, and basically just went full on with Twitter Spaces. And now we're a year later, and I'd say it's gone pretty well.
That was an incredible leap of faith. You went with your gut, and what you did is something that not many people get to do, which is find what they truly love and do it for their life. Some people have to pursue those passions as hobbies, as side gigs. You found what you loved, and you took a risk. You took a monetary risk. You took time and engagement. You saw how much people were paying attention to this, and you knew for the future that it was just going to keep growing and growing and growing. My question to you is, what did you intend to do with Wolf Financial as far as continue building anything, as when it comes to tech software, beyond just continuing to host, continuing to engage with fellow developers, because I know you have so many partnerships with people who come on and engage with you, and you reach out and you help other people get a leg up in this rabid attention economy, which is marvelous what you do. Did your team members take like the primary IP with them? Do you have something else that you're building? What did you want to do with that once you took that over?
Well, I think it was a pretty easy decision for me to not continue pursuing building out my own app.
Mm,
It's way harder than people think. It's just
yeah.
way, way, way harder than people think. And I'd been in that ecosystem for almost 2 years, trying to make it work and building. And it could have worked if we had, more money, more developers, more things like that. But I think I kind of had a sneak peek into that world and realized that the world that I wanted to pursue was one that was, I think, far more suitable for me, which is just lower overhead, lower responsibility to a team, and figuring out just how much I could do by myself. And so with that original IP for the app, that stayed with the original co-founders, but it's not on the App Store anymore. It's not available. It's not something that we're planning to pursue. There's some good stuff there. There's some good designs. They may sell it off in the future, but I'm not really worried about it. I was more like, I didn't even know how I was going to make any money, right? I was just like, hey, listen, people make money off social media. I know this is possible. We'll kind of see. And I think the blessing for me, and the reason that I haven't had to think too much into, building out my own platform or anything, has been how much of it's come to me. And
Mm-hmm.
what I ultimately took away from all of this is the power of building or working in public. And a lot of people put in so many hours into everything that they're doing, but nobody sees it, right? Like they just kind of work behind the scenes and they never give any updates, and they don't really like put out anything to the world. And it's like one day, like, oh, cool, here's a product. But for me, every day that I'm working, everybody sees that I'm working. Like people often call me, they're like the hardest working person on the Twitter and stuff like that. And I'm not, but I'm the one who's the most visible, right? Like I'm the most visible worker on Twitter. And that goes a long way, both for people actually seeing the fact that I'm working a lot, and also for potential customers seeing that I'm working a lot and then saying, hey, like that's someone I want to work with. Or they see me running a space for somebody like an AMA, and they say that's someone I'd love to have do an AMA with. So that's ended up where things came from, is just this idea of like working in public. So what holds next? I mean, we'll see. There's few things in the works. I'm working with some different companies. Definitely want to continue doing as many spaces as possible for right now, because I just think that that's the highest value of my time right now. And you never know when that window is going to close or when they'll change out spaces or something. So for right now, just really pounding the table there.
Building in public is something I've been bringing up a lot in spaces that I either host or speak on. I think it is what probably it's the most key factor that establishes trust with people who are either founders, part of a team. It allows you to either make a mistake and learn from it, and then everyone in the community can see that you are acknowledging something that you've either failed at or done wrong, and then you learn from that mistake. You don't try to overwrite it. You don't try to forget it. You learn from history and continue to build, and the community will embrace you for that because they can relate to that one on one and as a whole. And building in public means that people can engage with you in the process, offer feedback, say, hey, that's a great idea, I want to implement that too, or offer their ideas to you. And I think you're probably one of the biggest examples that, I mean, you host, I don't know, 40, 50 hours of spaces a week. And you do that with everyone who's willing to engage with you. And it's so admirable. What keeps you motivated to continue to do that day in and day out and not run out of steam?
I think that there's a lot of motivation for it, and I could break that down into three areas. The first is I genuinely enjoy it, right? It's a great way to spend my day. It makes me feel super productive. I hate wasting my day or doing things that don't make me feel productive. And so it's an easy way for me to fill my time with productive value. And so that's like right off the bat. Like I've had times where I've taken days off of spaces and I'm like, oh, you know what would have been nice today? Like 6 hours of spaces. That would have been nice today. And then number two, very lucrative, right? And that's in multiple ways. Lucrative for building my following. It's the most effective way that I build my following. Majority of my followers have, of course, come from Twitter Spaces. And on any given day, if I do Spaces, I know I'm going to be getting followers, hopefully hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And then monetary wise, right? I work with a number of companies now helping them market through Spaces. So yesterday when I'm doing 10 hours of Twitter Spaces, if even, 2-3 hours of that is paid, that's a great day's work. That's a great week's worth work right there. And so that's super, super nice. And then the third, which I'll just kind of put out there, is the building in public thing and like the working in public. And that's why I think that there's so much motivation to just get on, just because like people just see you live, and you just never know what's going to come from that. It's self-marketing, self-advertising in so many ways.
Yeah, that's huge. And again, like I'm a note taker, and again, as things are going, I'm jotting down notes. Right, build in public, be the most visible, like in your 3 points right there, and we'll make sure that at the tail end, we're going to go ahead and cut this and bring this to our listeners. But like, if there's anything else, because again, we're cognizant of time. I mean, you're a busy guy. I'm sure you got probably 3 more spaces to host here within the next 3 hours. But if there's one or two other takeaways that you would leave our audience with, like sound bites, things that we can go ahead and share, you want them to write down, what would it be?
Well, the most important thing that I've learned is the value of leaning on others in this industry and finding somebody that's already accomplished what you want to do and then using that connection to learn yourself instead of trying to just go through the motions and like bang your head against the wall and learn it. There's so many simple cases of this, like even with setting up a podcast, like setting up my first podcast felt so tiresome. Like the weeks that I went through of like trying to get it onto Fireside and trying to record in Riverside and trying to edit and all that stuff. And then I just hopped on a call with someone for like 20 minutes and they just walked me through all of it. It was just so simple, right? When they actually showed it to me. And that happens in so many cases. Like I show so many people how to use their first Twitter space versus them trying to fumble through it and like be on desktop and now they can't talk and all these type of pieces. So the first thing I'll say is instead of trying to just figure out everything yourself, really just search for somebody that already has done it beforehand, knows it like the back of their hand, will hop on a call with you for 10-20 minutes and they'll just teach it to you. Like I've got one of these tomorrow. I'm redoing my website for Wolf.Financial and I have to deal with Netlify and GoDaddy and honestly just things that I haven't dealt with before. So instead of dealing with it, I just texted a friend of mine who's a developer and said, hey, can you jump on a call with me for 20 minutes? And he said, yeah, of course. So that's one big thing that I'll just put out there. I think that that's super just applicable to all areas. And then the other piece that I can't stress enough is, in my opinion, the most valuable thing you can be doing, especially early on, but I don't think even if you're 30s, 40s, whatever, is build an audience. Like it's just so valuable in my opinion to having that audience, building that audience. I have conversations all the time with people that are like, I don't want to be on social media. I kind of want to cut out social media from my life. I feel like if I put out things on social media from my name, that it's going to be misconstrued against me and people see it in a negative light. Well, I tell them, one, like half the accounts on social media are anonymous, right? Like you can build an audience that isn't necessarily connected to your name, to your brand. Like just go out there and build something on social media. And then number two, I understand that it's like difficult, but if you really, can't do it yourself and don't want to, there's agencies and there's other people that will help you in assisting and building up an audience. But like above all else, like go out there and build something, because you really you don't know how much it benefits you until you have it. And once you have an audience, like my audience is my flywheel. It brings me deals. It brings me income, even when I'm not actively working on bringing those things in.
Absolutely. We've enjoyed working with our own studio, Bell Studios. On that note, you brought up all your social media, and we want to let our audience know where to connect with you now that we're winding down our episode. So just let us know all your accounts. I know Wolf_financial is your main Twitter account, but where else can our audience connect with you?
I don't want to confuse people too much, so just go to wolf_financial on Twitter and you should be good to go. If you do not have a Twitter, you can find me at wolf_financial on YouTube.
Perfect. We want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode. If you liked everything that you heard, keep tuning in. Hopefully, Gav, we can reconnect with you on another episode, see how things are going for you after you've had significantly more growth. I mean, you grow every single day. We're here at the Roadmap Show on YouTube. This has been Gogo and Coach. Yeah, and Gav Blaxberg of Wolf Financial.
Gav, we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. We'll make sure that we link everything in the show notes, and we know that you're busy, so we want to make sure that we allow for your schedule. So again, always offering a moment of gratitude. And as Gogo said, we're the Roadmap Show, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Roadmap. We're honored to host such fantastic guests every week and help share their stories with a wide audience.
We hope you enjoyed tuning in. And if you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channels. You can find us at The Roadmap Show on YouTube and Twitter, and The Roadmap.show on Instagram.
We'll join you again next week for another amazing conversation.
I'm Coach. She's Gogo. Thanks for being a part of our roadmap.